Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay, maybe a little touchy of a topic for some people. I've gotten into a few social media dust-ups over this, but I want to talk today about the American chestnut. Now, once upon a time, the American chestnut was, depending on who you talk to or whose data you're looking at, about a quarter to half of the trees present in the Appalachian region. So basically it's an East Coast tree, and not really in the coastal plain, not really out where it got kind of flatter a whole lot, but in the, from the Allegheny Plateau to the Piedmont and some other little outlying populations, and from all the way down in Georgia and Alabama all the way up into, I believe it went all the way up into Maine. So basically the whole Appalachian region. And it's a great lumber tree. Chestnut wood is highly sought after even today, and ironically it used to be so common around here that they made barns out of it. It was real good, solid, durable wood for making furniture, and it's sought after for people making fancy gun stocks and things like that now. And I've known people who've actually salvaged wood from 100-and-some-year-old barn that got torn down, and made hella good money off of it, just because once you sand off all that weathering and cracking and stuff and get to the wood underneath, it's still this really great wood for making some really fancy stuff. But aside from lumber, because these things got huge, they normally a mature tree would get over 100 feet tall. Some people say they topped out over 150. Most people claim at least over 100. And at least 4 or 5 feet in diameter. I mean, you can still find stumps every now and then today that are, 3-4 feet around, and the stumps still exist. They're starting to decay, but they're kind of hanging on a little bit, and some of them are still sending up sucker shoots. But more on that later. The other thing is the nuts themselves. I mean, they fed everything from bears to chipmunks as far as the wildlife, and they also were a reliable human food source. People, you always hear that Christmas song, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. That was a common thing. This time of year in the fall, people gathered them up. They produced nuts in great quantities, and there were more than the squirrels could run off with, and people would gather them up, and they would roast them and they would eat them. Also, especially in the southern Appalachians, farmers had a habit of free-ranging their hogs. So they would actually I don't think I'm gonna bother linking to it because it's a book, not an online source. But the Foxfire books, you can read about how in the old days, I want to say it's Foxfire 3 that has it, about the way they traditionally raised livestock back in the old days. And you got to figure this was written in the 1970s, and they were interviewing people who grew up in the late 18 and early 1900s. So whole different time period. But they would mark their hogs usually by making cuts on their ears and then just let them roam free in the woods. So it's kind of like the old deal of the Wild West with branding cattle and free ranging them, and then you round them up and you collect the ones that got your brand, and you're not supposed to round up any of the ones with somebody else's brand. That's kind of how they kept them separate. And but at any rate, that's what they did with hogs. And the hogs ate largely what they called mast. And mast is a term for basically acorns and nuts and things like that. And a large part of the southern hog farming was done that way in the Appalachians, and it relied heavily on chestnuts, because chestnuts being, the dominant tree, there were more of them than there were the oaks and everything else at that period in time. So, it was actually part of the livestock industry even in the United States. So huge economic importance to this tree. But there are several species of chestnut in this world. There's actually several species of chestnut in the United States. Some of the ones that have smaller nuts are called chinkapins. Not going to go into those too much right now. The important one right here is there's a European chestnut and there's a Chinese chestnut. And the Chinese chestnut doesn't even get that big. Has decent nuts, and those are the ones that you normally see in a grocery store now. If you do see chestnuts, they're normally Chinese chestnuts. And the reason why is there's a fungus that's native to Southeast Asia. I'm drawing a blank on the scientific name, but I will connect a link that has a little bit more in-depth information on the virus below. But because it occurs in Southeast Asia, the Chinese trees really don't have much of an effect. I mean, it's chicken pox at the worst. It'll cause a little bit of a blistering on the bark. It's cosmetic, no real effect on the health of the tree. But this fungal infection, the European and American trees are highly susceptible to it. And somebody, and this goes for a lot of invasive species, don't know why you want the Chinese version so bad when you got this beautiful version that lives here anyway. But somehow with Chinese chestnuts coming over here and being planted, maybe somebody just wanted one that was a little bit smaller so they could have a baby one in their front yard. I don't know. But with Chinese chestnuts came this fungal infection. And in the early 1900s, up through roughly World War II, it wiped out 99% of the chestnuts, if not more. And most of the ones that are left they're sucker shoots. They might get 30 or 40 feet tall and produce nuts in some localities. I know of several in the local area around here. I have never seen one reach a size where it actually produced nuts. I mean, they get like 15, 20 feet tall and they die back and it sends up more. They leaf out, they grow long enough to provide enough energy to keep the roots alive, but the bark fungus comes back and hits them again and they die back. And that's sad, but they are hanging on. And there are some trees that did have an immunity naturally. And there is a nonprofit that has been going around and trying to breed these trees and create a population, a sustainable population of blight-resistant, 100% pure American chestnut trees. It's run basically out of or in cooperation with Virginia Tech. It's the American Chestnut Cooperators Foundation. a CCF. They are the method that I think shows the most promise and the only program that I know of that is trying to bring back an actual Native American chestnut. However, if you type in American chestnut, one of the first things that's going to pop up on Google is the American Chestnut Foundation, which is TACF. Yeah, I guess, well, I think ACF makes plastic pipe or something. That's why they got the T on it. But at any rate, they are a much more popular group. And for years, they were working on a hybrid, crossbreeding the Chinese chestnut with the American chestnut, and then trying to cross it back with the American chestnut to get something that's like 90% American chestnut, but has enough of the Chinese chestnut in it to have immunity. The only benefit I see to this is it may work faster, since not all of the trees that they are breeding from the resistant American chestnut trees inherit that immunity. Only a small percentage of them do. I believe it's around 10 or 15%, something like that. So out of every generation, it's not like every nut that sprouts provides a resistant tree. So there is that problem. So it's slow. They're slowly trying to improve the breeding of the native trees in that program. But the hybrid program might actually be faster. However, the tree that it produces will always be a hybrid. It will never be a native tree. And being that it's, hybrids do happen in nature, but they don't happen naturally between species that don't share a common range. So it would still be a tree that's really not native anywhere. It would not be like a wild plant. It would be like some hybrid flower you buy at Lowe's or Walmart. Therefore, just from an ethical point of view, I don't think ethically you can call it native. It is not native. Maybe faster, may bring back many, if not all, of the desirable traits, both to the economy and to the ecosystem, as the American chestnut, but it will never actually be a true American chestnut. It'll always be this hybrid imitator that is not really native anywhere. And then more recently, out of SUNY, S-U-N-Y, State University in New York, there is a program that also seems to be backed by the American Chestnut Foundation now, that is producing a genetically modified tree, which seems to be an even faster track to reproducing the economic and possibly environmental place of the Native American chestnut. My understanding is that they actually took genes from wheat, which doesn't make much sense to me, because how would wheat be immune to a bark pathogen when it doesn't have bark? So I'm not sure what would impart that immunity. Maybe it's a general immunity to fungal infections. The reading I have done didn't really explain the logic that well to me, why they jumped to that. They just kind of said that they know the genome of wheat, and they know how to get the little piece they need to splice into the American chestnut and give it immunity. GMO crops are a topic I'd like to do. Well, I'm actually putting together a video on that. I just want to have my references and all my ducks in a row, because I know that's kind of a hot button issue. The thing is, a genetically modified tree isn't native anywhere and never will be native anywhere. So once again, just from an ethical point of view, ethically, I cannot consider that native. And the other ethical question is, since there is an ongoing program that has great potential and great probability, in fact, of eventually producing a healthy, widespread, genetically pure American chestnut population that carries that immunity in most, if not all, of its natural offspring, and once again fulfills its natural role in its entirety, and also fulfills that role in the economy, as far as lumber, as far as food, as far as wildlife benefit. I think there's a certain ethical question as far as widespread release of a genetically modified, or even to some extent a hybrid version, because these would cross-pollinate with the genetically pure American chestnuts potentially make that genetically pure strain go extinct from crossbreeding. Chestnuts, like everything in the oak family, they're more or less a wind-pollinated plant. So, the pollen can travel great distances. It's not like if you plant them 100 yards apart, the bees aren't going to travel that far. The wind can take that pollen a long, long way. So that's an ethical question too. Those are my arguments against the other two programs. Most people go off on me for being unscientific and this and that, but I guarantee you my opinion is based on scientific facts. And it is just a scientific fact that neither a hybrid nor a genetically modified tree can be considered native by definition. And there is a program working with the native trees, and the only disadvantage that program has is it seems that it will take a longer time to achieve the end result desired. And I'm sure that the timber industry is interested in being able to log 100-foot tall chestnut trees, and I'm sure that there's money involved in it somewhere on that end. I'm not saying that everybody involved in producing a hybrid or a genetically modified tree is in it for money from the lumber industry, but I'm sure the lumber industry is looking at it. But I think I'll stop and leave it there. Hopefully that makes you think. Hopefully I can persuade some people to, agree with my opinion based on the merits of my argument, and not just some, irrational thing about the GMO trees or something like that. And if you do, I'm going to have links below for the American Chestnut Cooperator foundation, and hopefully you will support them. And there's also an ongoing comment period on basically deregulating and releasing the genetically modified trees for being just released into the public. And I believe the comment period is open till October 19th. Please click that link and go there and, you know, offer your opinion to the public comments. And with that, I will see you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.